I almost forgot to start recording. Welcome back to chess. Today we're doing something a little bit different, which is I'm going to be sort of talking through specifically how I see tactics in chess as a 1500 player. Um, and also, I'm not ending this video until I lose, and as soon as I lose, I'm ending the video. So a little bit of high stakes because I tend to make a lot of stupid decisions and because I don't actually know this opening very well, which isn't great, but could be a good segue into me starting to look for tactics even earlier on. So I really, I mean, basically what it all comes down to for me is looking at my opponent's threats. So I'm immediately looking at this move and wondering how I could stop it. If I just make a pawn move to develop my bishop, for example, the opponent can play knight g4 and threaten this in a way that it's not easy for me to defend without either losing a pawn or or anything actually. Otherwise than that, it's really hard to defend. So I think I have to move my bishop here. I'm just going to move out to here to defend my knight. I could have also moved it here, which is probably a better move. There's sort of a rule in chess when developing to develop your bishop to the furthest possible square. And from the reason I did that is so now I can defend this pawn and not have to worry about castling like this. And now if the opponent wants to get two pieces for rook and pawn, they can. But in general, I don't believe it'd be a very good idea. I can't play for this pawn push. Opponent has three defenders. I'd only have, or three attackers as it would be, and I would only have two defenders. So I'll just go here for now. And now we'll see. Let's see. Opponent's queen is there. That's a little bit annoying, but not really very much a problem for us. I could kick away this knight. In fact, this knight has almost no viable squares. I think it would have to sacrifice here, which would lead to an interesting imbalance. It might not be very good for me because my king would have to end up in that space. But we're going to go for it because it's interesting. Now, this is something I did not calculate, and it could make this video very short. We'll find out. So we can pre-move this because we have to take with the rook, and then we have to take with the king. And now opponent will probably start launching an attack of some sort, I would imagine. But not yet. Now we can develop our bishop, probably move up our queen so we can put a rook on this semi-open f-file. Let's see. Opponent makes it really hard to push this pawn, but in doing so, makes it really easy for me to plant a knight here. Now if I do that immediately, the queen will have to move. But eventually they could take with the bishop, but that would at least give me the bishop pair. So I'm going to jump in here right away. It also threatens a fork against the king and the rook. So the queen actually has to drop all the way back. Now I'm going to move the queen up to allow my rook over. And there we go. I'm going to play c4, so if the opponent takes, I'll get a really strong pawn in the center. And that will really sort of solidify that. So now opponent castles. I'm really tempted to go here, takes, queen h6, and then threatening to put my knight here and checkmate. It might be a really good idea, so I do want to try to calculate this. The bishop takes, if pawn takes, if pawn doesn't take, we go back. If pawn takes, queen takes. Then what can happen? The queen could not go there because it's not defended, so the queen can't get in. The bishop can't move. If opponent could push the pawn, but to stop our knight from going in. And then we could still go knight here, then the queen could go here. At which case we could go knight there at that point. I think this works. If this doesn't, this will be a very short video. I realize I'm not explaining myself super well, and I apologize for that. I will try to get better as time goes on. But the basic idea is that it's really hard to stop checkmate once my queen is here. So the opponent actually might... Well, if the opponent doesn't take, then that's also interesting because then I can go queen here. Or I could go queen here and just get a queen trade and be up a pawn. I could also just move my bishop back, which is probably what I would do, before sliding my rook over, getting my king to safety. But no. So here, let's see what my opponent's idea is that I missed. If opponent takes with the bishop, I just play knight here, and then it's either checkmate or the opponent. Well, then they could move the rook. So they do go there. Oh, for some reason I thought I could still play knight here, but obviously I can't. So that's not good. I could still go here and here, but that was a miscalculation on my part because I forgot if they push that pawn, then my knight could not move forwards. So now I'm thinking of check here, and then nothing. I have a repetition of moves if I want it. I could also go here, then probably rook moves up, then here, rook moves over, and well, let's start with this. Because right now the opponent can't stop the repetition like that. The opponent goes there. My idea is to go bishop here, forcing the rook to move, at which point I can take with check. Then the king would go here and that would be checkmate. I did not calculate all of that up beforehand, which I really should have. So you'll see maybe this is just a problem with me. Maybe this is a problem with multiple people at my level, but a big issue I have is I'm a very lazy calculator, and I tend not to calculate all the way to the end before I start a variation, which is very bad and leads to me losing a lot of games. It's also could just be a flaw of my own. For sure, if the queen goes up, of course, then the knight can take. The rook has to sacrifice itself, so it's not a fork. Queen takes, and we're in an interesting position where we're up material, I believe. Yeah, we're just up an exchange with a sort of big attack on the king, and the opponent's still undeveloped. So opponent takes there. That's interesting. My idea now is to go knight here, and I think there's no way to stop checkmate unless I'm missing something. Maybe knight here, king moves up. That's interesting. Then what? Again, I didn't see that either. So probably taking is not the right move. If we go knight here, then if the king moves up, we can check. King moves here. We could check. That'd be checkmate. So if the knight moves here and the king goes up, then we check. King goes back. And we take the rook with check. King moves up. We take the bishop. Then we can trade queens, and that should be fine. So I think this works fine. course, if the king doesn't move, I think it's just checkmate, like this. Or if the queen moved up for whatever reason. Well, this isn't checkmate. What am I talking about? Actually, I don't know what I was thinking. If the rook moves there, that's checkmate. So now we can go, let's see. If we go check here, check here, that seems like checkmate anyway. Let's see. King's forced to move here. Then king's forced to move here. Then it's checkmate with the pawn. So not a very good display of my calculation skills because I didn't calculate the whole way through, but that was quite a long line. We did win in the end. I'm pretty happy with that game actually, despite maybe not being the best calculator. But and yeah, I mean calculating, my biggest struggle is actually seeing my opponent's threats, as I said at the beginning of the video. But being able to just sort of visualize through and remember where the pieces are is really the difficult part. So let's hop into the next game. Because we're playing until I lose. Next, we have a d4 opening, which I'm not super familiar with. Let's go c6, inviting a sort of Slav. But now they turn it into the Caro-Kann, which I don't know much about actually. Now we get an advanced variation of the Caro-Kann, which I know nothing about, so I'm going to try to just clarify the structure here. That's not very tactical, but opponent could play here, but they don't, they take. So we're going to take with the g-pawn, and now our king side's already very open. So obviously we're going to try to castle queen side at some point. Unless I've just already made a calculation mistake, which is quite possible, because I didn't calculate, as you saw. And now we're in a sort of weird situation where it's hard to develop. Yeah. Alright, not ideal. So let's move here. Try to get the knight out. Try to get the bishop out. Try to get the rook out. Overall, that was a bit of a disaster. Now we could go here, but that would do nothing. Well, we could go here. Pawn takes. No. Yeah, so we're gonna have to move the king all the way out here. It's a funny move, but I think actually isn't terrible. But yes, overall this was a disaster of an opening because I didn't stop to calculate when I was in an unfamiliar position. I'm going to play knight here, knowing that the knight could check me, but then I could just move. Queen could go back, and then I would have to move up. Actually, that's very bad for me. So first I'm just going to play a6. So if the knight checks me, I can move back. That's exactly what's happening here. And now there are no checks. And eventually I'll probably be safe. So now the queen's going to try to move around to here, presumably. That would be checkmate as it stands. But I can develop my knight. It's a little bit sad to lock in my bishop. But I think this is the right move overall. Basically trying to play for the center break to give my pieces a little bit more room to breathe. Now if we go here, opponent can just take. But actually, let's try to develop here by putting the bishop here. Sort of trying to get a trade and get the knight out. Probably to here, which will also help support this pawn break. So opponent takes right away. I guess we'll take. Then we'll take with the knight. And that was very strange because to me it felt like the opponent had a big attack and then kind of just threw it away. As well as this move. I mean, I understand now that this is to prevent me from getting this break in, but I'll still build it up like this. And then probably put a rook behind. Probably this rook. So here we have a check. We move back. To be honest, I didn't see that. Once again, I was a little bit too fast. But obviously I could not have taken. Alright. Now, if we want to avoid losing material, we'd have to make a very sad move. Just rook up. We could also instead do something like this, allowing the knight to take our rook, and then just playing in the center with the opponent being underdeveloped. Let's see. I don't think this is something you can very easily calculate. If I just moved here, for example, knight takes, king takes. What, I guess this here takes, or even rook takes with check. I think I want to do this. It's probably wrong. Maybe we'll take a quick break to use game review, but allowing the knight to take this rook also gets rid of all the danger in the position for now. So we don't have to worry about getting checkmated. Knight could also take that way, which I did see, and which I'm also entirely okay with because it sort of means that we have equal material and the same things are relatively true. I was thinking about trying to use that bishop to block off this diagonal if the pawn pushed forward. And that is now very unlikely to happen. Now the king is opening up so it could castle either way. I might go here, but that's sort of an empty threat. I'm going to try to clarify the center. So if opponent takes, I take back. Like, which way do I take back, actually? Interesting. Now I could take, but opponent can take back with the knight. I'm thinking since I need more time, since my position's locked down, I want to keep the center closed, keep everything closed until I can really get my rook into play. So, yeah, that's what we're going to try to do. Rook moves over. I don't see any threats for the opponent. It'd be even hard to attack my pawn, so I'm going to try to move the knight. So let's see. I like the idea of the knight being on this square. It would attack all three of these things, and it's not easy to kick out, especially when the opponent only has a knight as a minor piece. Doesn't allow the queen to get in at all. I think it's pretty good. I've been looking at this knight sort of moving around at some point, but it'd be very hard to get a configuration where I can actually get checkmated at this point. Also, because there are three threats, the opponent would have a very hard time defending all of them at once. Opponent, I guess this is not a threat. So I'll go here. I think the knight still can't get in. Could sacrifice, but I don't think that would go anywhere. Let's go here. I don't expect the opponent to go back to h1, but maybe they will. And they do. Alright. Now we could build up pressure. This knight actually does a good job of defending that now. But instead, I'm going to move the king here. And I can't actually move the rook away because that would allow the queen in, but I could push this pawn up and try to begin my own attack of sorts. If I could move the knight up one square, that'd be really nice. But in order to make that maneuver work, it requires quite a bit of time. But what I'd like to do is eventually push b6 and kick the queen away from the protection of this pawn. Now, of course, knight is threatening something, very obviously, to take and fork my queen and rook. So we could go, if we go here just to trade queens, the queens could trade and then I would lose a pawn. We could also go here. Or go here, which also attacks the knight, which I think I like best. So let's go here. And also, since the king is here, there are still no infiltration squares for the enemy queen. And we still have this idea of pushing, not like that, but pushing and taking this pawn. Because pushing also frees up our other rook. The opponent moves the knight back, which means now this is threatened, but it's not really threatened. At some point I am also looking at this tactic, which allows us to sort of break through. But I like the idea of offering the queen trade here, because the queen doesn't actually have very many good squares. But then again, I want to win, and there's no reason to trade the queens. Well, I have a weaker king. That's the reason to trade the queens, actually. Like, even if I go here, queen could go up here. That's targeting some things. If I do attempt to trade the queens and my opponent refuses, well, actually they have this check too, which is very annoying now. So if they check, I could counter with pushing the pawn anyway. So let's offer the trade of queens, because that also allows me to double up. If we were to trade, my rook would be on e7, which would let me put my other rook on e8 very quickly, and then we could try to go for this pawn break. This rook is always tied down, so now the queen moves back. We'll push this pawn. It's a very committal move, but the enemy queen doesn't have too many places to go. It goes here. We could try to do this pawn break right now, because if the opponent takes, then they're forced to trade queens. And, well, see, one time I move quickly, and I blunder something really bad. Wow, well this game will probably end very quickly. But it's not over yet. If opponent takes the queen, which is probably what they will do, because I'm sure it's the best move, I can push this pawn. Which is, I have to at this point. Queen could still take, I could take the rook. And then I would take this knight, and I would be down a rook, but it wouldn't be quite so bad as being down a queen. Rook could block. I could take with the knight, but queen takes knight, probably the best move. Pawn takes rook equals queen, because why not? Rook takes. Now I take this pawn. And, oh well. This is something that's very brutal brutal about chess is that there's really no room for error. I made one mistake. I moved quickly one time without checking, and it was a very obvious pin, but that's what happens. Now they threaten this. Now I'm trying to think if there's anything interesting here. I could go here, but still takes with check. That'd be a terrible, terrible move. I could. So I think I just have to take. Then rook takes. Then king here. It's still not easy for the queen to give too many checks, but it is fairly lost. So of all the places, I could also move here, but there's this check. That's no good. So I'll move here. Dreaming of one day somehow getting a back rank, getting one rook here. But it's very unlikely to happen. Still, it's not entirely trivial. Opponent could. Alright. That's a good move. Now we go here. We trade. Or we don't. So now we'll do this. If for some reason opponent doesn't trade, we still probably lose. But opponent does. Solidly up a queen for a rook and a lot of pawns. We'll try to make this as difficult for the opponent as possible. Not a very good teaching video, seeing as I lost so quickly, but... And then I blundered the rook. Oh well, now there's chances for a stalemate. That last move was not a very good one. I should be trying to push all my pawns as quickly as possible. Alright. Opponent's not playing around. Trying to checkmate me as soon as possible. Taking quite a lot of time, which tells me they are worried a little bit about stalemates. If the queen had taken and then that pawn had promoted, and I'd been able to get my other pawns off the board, that would have been stalemate. Which is kind of funny. We're playing a higher rated opponent, so it's not the end of the world that we lost, but still we lost in a completely preventable way. Just not looking out for a pin. It's not like it was anything complicated, so I'm definitely disappointed about that. But now we wait and see how the opponent decides to finish us off. Sometimes opponents like to play around, get down to only a few seconds. If we're lucky, maybe the opponent will forget that there's no increment and go down to 1 second or something and lose. Or maybe if we're really lucky, the opponent's internet has cut out. We're going to try to get rid of this pawn first. If the opponent ever does get rid of this pawn, like I said, and then promotes. So if there's a queen here, and my king's here, I think that's... Well, now let's... Opponent can still make a queen, but does that. Alright, and they're just gonna ladder mate. So there's no chance. Oh, well. Well, you know what I said. So, thanks for watching. Hope you found this informative, but clearly, how I see tactics, even as, you know, whatever rating I am, The answer is not very well. So that's it.